Hi everyone. So I want to ask you, how do you characterise your exposure profiles? Now, exposure profiles have been traditionally characterised by looking at the maximum risk workers, but recently the emphasis has changed, where we look at characterisation of the exposure profiles of all exposures of all workers on all days. Now, we characterise our exposure profiles in many different ways, but I want to focus on just one of those ways that we use to do that. The 95% upper confidence limit of the mean exposure, or the UCL. And I want to ask you two questions. And the first one is, are you confident that the UCL adequately protects your workers? So our ultimate aim as hygienists is to provide reasonable assurance that our workers are protected. But what's reasonable assurance? The 95th percentile gives us 95% confidence in our exposure estimate. So my second question is, what do you mean when you characterise an exposure using the UCL, and how do you translate that into ordinary language that can be understood by workers and by managers alike? It's a fairly abstract concept, this UCL, so we need to be able to put it into ordinary language. It reminds me of a movie I saw as a child. I get scared and nervous at the mention of statistics, and in this movie, the lead character was going to look after an army colonel and his 7 children, and she was very scared and nervous about doing that. But she sang a song and came to the conclusion that she had confidence in confidence alone. And I think we should join her in having confidence in confidence limits. But when she arrived, the home looked very scary and imposing. And it must have been like seeing this, the log normal distribution. So what does the log normal distribution tell us? Well, it tells us, it's quite obvious, isn't it, that if we calculate our OEL and find that it's below the upper confidence limit, we can be 95% sure that our exposures are below that level. Let's put that another way. We've only got a 5% chance that we're exceeding the OEL. So when we talk to workers and managers, what does that mean? So we say, there's only a 5% chance that your exposure will exceed the OEL. Now let's say they do understand what we're talking about. So they might reply, so that's a 5% chance. So that's about half an hour every day, 1 day every month, about 2.5 weeks a year, that about half my crew, because it's the mean, is going to expose the OEL. You reply a little unconfidently, I guess so. So they say, 2.5 weeks a year, that half my people are going to be over the OEL. Well, that's not good enough, Mr. Hygiene person. 2.5 weeks a year does not sound reasonable to me. So, where does that leave us? We've got a rather abstract concept, and how confident, how sure can we be that we are protecting our workers? So, I phoned a friend here, and I spoke to Mr. Bond, Russell Bond, your friend and mine. And he explained it to me this way. He said, think of it in terms of legal principles, and that's the balance of probability and the burden of proof. And he said balance of probability suggests more probable than not. That's greater than 50%. But a much higher burden of proof is what we talk about when we're talking about the 95% confidence limit. So we can say that, beyond reasonable doubt is a much higher burden of proof. So we can say that when we're talking about the 95% confidence limit, that gives us a high level of certainty that an exposure has or has not occurred, and therefore a much higher burden of proof. So therefore we can be confident in our UCL. And our UCL does provide us a good assurance that we are protecting our workers. It does give us a better estimate than something like, say, the mean, the median, or talking in terms of the range. So I think we can be confident and assured that when we're using the UCL, we are providing adequate protection to our workers. And I think it's clear why we use it. What's not clear to me, though, is what it actually means to workers. And the best that I can do is that about half of you will exceed this level once a month. I'm not sure why that's crossed out, but anyway. It's a long-term toxin. The health effects are long-term average exposure, and so long as we look after that average exposure, you'll be okay. but I'm not sure that's accurate enough. I'm not sure it informs, integrates, or inspires, or it is hygiene enough. If it may be, but if you've got some ideas on that that could explain it better, let's chat. Thank you. 'Cause I gotta have faith.